The Tampa Bay Lightning have announced their training camp roster ahead of the upcoming 2024-2025 season. Who in Lightning's training camp needs to make the biggest impact as we get ready for the upcoming season? Find out on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Lightning. Josh Sperber here. I want to thank you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Josh Sperber, your host of Locked On Lightning every day, and we are getting ready for Lightning training camp. Yesterday, the team announced their 58-man training camp roster, 6 goalies, 15 defenders, and 37 forwards on that roster, and a lot of new faces, a lot of minor leaguers on that roster, and of course, plenty of some of the transactions. So let's get to it. We're going to talk through the forwards, defenders, goalies, just kind of break down the training camp roster as the Lightning get ready to start breaking that roster down from the 58 players where it currently sits to the 23 needed for opening night when the 2024 and 2025 season begins for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So we're going to start with the forwards, looking on that roster, and a couple names just pop right out to me. Luke Glendening and Cam Atkinson, the first two named. Obviously, it goes in numerical order, and those are both two veteran players who I think can make a big impact for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Cam Atkinson is a guy who was signed to a one-year contract on July the 2nd, one of a handful of wingers that the Lightning signed shortly after the departure of Steven Stamkos, and Cam Atkinson picked up from the Flyers of Philadelphia. He has been with a couple teams in the NFL, 400 points in 10 seasons with the Blue Jackets before he was traded to the Flyers, where he spent a couple of seasons, and now he will be with the Tampa Bay Lightning. He played 70 games last season in his second year with the Flyers after missing 2022-23 due to injury, and a career former sixth-round pick is healthy and back for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He has played over 700 NHL games in his career. He'll top 800 likely with Tampa this season. Now, Cam Atkinson is a guy who the last couple of years has not had a positive plus-minus, hasn't been over the positive threshold since 2020 with the Columbus Blue Jackets. The last two seasons, he's combined for a minus 24 with a total of 36 goals and 42 assists. 250 goals almost, 231 career assists. And injuries have really marred his NHL career a little bit, but the last two seasons he played with Philadelphia combined to play over 140 games. Now, coming to the Lightning, he's likely to move to the right wing, probably a second-line guy I see for Cam Atkinson, but he's still a guy who has been there and done that in the postseason. He was instrumental to the Columbus Blue Jackets in a win over the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2018 and 2019 after he led the team with a career high in goals with 41 for the Blue Jackets. He did score a goal against the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2018 and 2019. Now he brings some of that playoff experience, just some of that big game experience for Cam Atkinson, not over the last couple of years with the Flyers, but this is a guy who has just been on a team that the last couple seasons, frankly, has not been that good. And I'm sure Cam Atkinson is going to want a new beginning here in Tampa. And I think adding just a guy who's been in the league for almost 10 years is always helpful, because you're losing Steven Stamkos. That is still just going to be an underlining theme of this Lightning season. Probably going to be something I mentioned too much here on Locked On Lightning, but it's important. I mean, this is just a franchise player, a guy who is one of the best Lightning players in team history. We don't have to go through his stats. You guys all know it. But the Lightning kind of have to replace his production, and that is something that you always need to do when you lose players in sport. But replacing his experience is really going to take a lot, and having two players like Luke Glendening and Cam Atkinson is important, frankly, for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think those are guys who have just been around. Both of them are in their 30s, and I think having those guys on the second, third lines, whatever you want to say it, just having guys out front who have been in the league for almost 20 years combined, that's always helpful. So just having those two guys can help a whole lot of the younger players. Glendening, a center who is one of the oldest players on the Lightning team at 35 years old. Another one of the oldest guys, Ryan McDonough, is someone that we're going to talk about quite a bit as well. And Glendening had his first season of the Lightning last year, played all but one game for Tampa after a couple successful seasons with the Dallas Stars. Just 10 goals in 81 games for Glendening. And he's certainly looking to have a bounce back season, but this isn't a guy that the Lightning are looking for big goal production from. There's other places that they can get their goals, and I think Glendening is really a guy who's just there to help show the younger guys the ropes and just, have someone to turn to in tough moments, who has just been around the league for quite a bit, because a lot of these other Lightning forwards that we're going to talk about are quite young. Connor Geekie being one of them, acquired in the Mikhail Sergachev trade, along with J.J. Moser to the Utah Hockey Club. Now, we talked about this yesterday, about how Mikhail Sergachev was tabbed to be the next Lightning first-line defender. He and Victor Hedman were set to have a partnership that was to last another half decade. Hedman just signed his 4-year contract, and Sergachev was tabbed by a lot of people to replace him. We'll talk more about who could replace Sergachev on the first-line defense in a little bit. We're still kind of focusing on the offense. We're definitely going to talk more about J.J. Moser in a little bit, but Connor Geekie, a very interesting name for the Tampa Bay Lightning. A guy who is about 20 years old, 11th pick in the 2022 NHL draft. His older brother, Morgan, played college hockey, and Geekie has played mostly in the minor leagues over the course of his hockey career. Connor Geekie, one of the newest members of the Lightning, announced at the beginning of July. He's still looking for his first pro games, and he certainly does have a shot of making the opening day roster. He had 5 points in the IIHF World Junior Championship in 5 games with Canada, finishing with a plus-minus of +2. 2 goals, 1 assist in 5 games for the Canadian U20 team, and that is never something that you should take lightly. The guy has been playing some kind of semi-pro hockey since 2013. Canadian international, could make a big impact, likely to start the season on a two-way basis and maybe shuttle back and forth from the Tampa Lightning's minor league affiliates, but he is certainly someone that I expect the Lightning to work into the fold of their offense. You don't trade a high-level defender like Sergachev for 2 young players unless you're expecting to use them early and often. J.J. Moser was extended on his contract, added 2 years after the trade, and Moser is a guy who I think is going to be a pretty key player on defense for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was actually their most recent transaction, but Connor Geekie is someone who does not have NHL ice time just yet, and he's part of the potential of the Tampa Bay Lightning in that he's unproven, he's untested, like a lot of some of the younger guys that acquired this all season. And you don't really know what to expect from him, but you know that there are there are high expectations attached to a name like that. So Connor Gee, I think, is someone who really has to show out in training camp. He's got to show his new teammates why they traded a guy who was so good for the Tampa Bay Lightning in Mikhail Sergachev for such a young player. I mean, this is Sergachev was a big factor in those Stanley Cups with Tampa Bay. And now the Utah Hockey Club are really going to be building their defense around him. So with the Lightning in somewhat of a rebuild since the Steven Stamkos trade, Connor Geekie is very key to that rebuild. So I think of all of the players on the Lightning training camp roster, at least in the offensive players, he is the guy that I will be watching the closest. Nico Huhtinen is another guy. He was signed to a two-way contract recently. Not much is known about him, but he comes with a whole lot of height. And one more offensive player before we go to break that I'm going to keep my eye on is Lukas Svejkovsky. I apologize if I mess up that pronunciation. You're looking at former Pittsburgh Penguins that have come to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Jake Gensel is really the guy come to mind. But he signed his 7-year deal after that Svejkovsky trade. The same day, June 30th, Lukas Svejkovsky for Bennett MacArthur. Jake Gensel was acquired from Carolina for a 2025 third-round pick. Gensel is obviously a guy who deserves watching. The new NHL game on EA Sports, NHL 25, rated him a 90, number 6 of the top 10 left wings rated in the game, if video game ratings mean anything to you in terms of how you adjudicate player skills. I know it certainly counts to me, but I think that's going to be for another podcast episode. So Jake Gensel and Lukas Svejkovsky, both former Penguins that really need to step up. Gensel, I think, needs to take on a role as a leader. He's going to be expected to take up at least some of the mantle from Steven Stamkos, taking that left wing position on the first line more than likely. But Lukas Svejkovsky is another guy who's going to have to prove himself. He was a 4th rounder in the 2020 NHL draft, played mostly in the ECHL, and ended the season in the AHL with the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Penguins and got 4 points in there. He is slowly climbing up, a guy that we might not see until the end of the season, but I expect Lukas Svejkovsky to play with the Lightning first team at some point in 2024. And that is going to be it for the forward portion of our training camp roster. But first, we are going to take a break and have a word with our friends from FanDuel, because let's face it, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book, and we have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NHL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and some form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Join us at FanDuel.com. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. They'll have NHL odds. You can bet everything. Don't bet everything on the Lightning in this upcoming season. We are continuing with the training camp roster primer here on Locked On Lightning, your team every day. We talked about some of the key forwards they're going to have to make an impact. I definitely think there are more that I did not miss. Nick Paul and Braden Point are certainly guys that need to show some more, I think, for Tampa. If you have agreements, disagreements, our Twitter and Instagram are in the bio. Feel free to DM us there. You can also DM me. My X is on the screen, Josh_Sperber, if you want to talk more about some of the impact players that we may have missed. But if we missed any on offense, I don't think we're missing too much on defense, because I really think defense is where the Lightning have to prove the most in this upcoming season. Losing Stamkos is one thing, but losing half of a defensive partnership is difficult, and Victor Hedman is going to have a bit more pressure this year. I mentioned yesterday that I think he's going to be the next captain of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and he's really going to have to prove his leadership during training camp that is beginning. But there are plenty of other players who have to step up on defense. We mentioned J.J. Moser, so let's talk about him a little bit. J.J. Moser was the defender acquired in the Mikhail Sergachev trade. And he, I think, is going to face the most pressure from Lightning fans because of that trade. He is a young, relatively unproven defender that was acquired, as I mentioned, along with Connor Geekie in the Mikhail Sergachev trade. He was a second-round pick for Arizona in 2021. The last 2 seasons, he has played over 160 games, all but 2 games in the last 2 years with Arizona. Not making a whole lot of noise down with the Coyotes, but a plus-minus of -5 last year, a total of -27. And yeah, he's had the better part of 3 NHL seasons under his belt. He only played 43 games in his first year in 2021 after 18 games with the AHL. And the Swiss international has plenty of IIHF experience, the World Junior Championship twice, 3 years in the World IHF Championships with Switzerland. And he's going to be expected to be a high-line defender. I anticipate that he's going to be the second-line defender, maybe even the first line for Janis Moser. I think it's obvious that Victor Hedman is going to stay stuck in his starting spot, and J.J. Moser is going to have to compete for a first-line spot, but I think it's not out of the question, and I think that should certainly be a goal for J.J. Moser. But I think at the beginning of the season, Ryan McDonagh is going to take that other first-line defense spot, and he might be the most crucial player that the Lightning sign in the offseason. I think the easy answer to that question is definitely Jake Gensel. Again, we don't need to keep going into the amount of pressure that he is going to be facing, as he is maybe going to take up the number 2 man in the Lightning offense role from Steven Stamkos. So obviously his importance is pretty big, but I think Ryan McDonagh could be very key to how the Tampa Bay Lightning perform this season. He is a guy who has already been with this team. It's going to be his second stint with the Lightning. He was key in those playoff years, the Stanley Cup years. Ryan McDonagh, not an unknown name around Lightning fandom, and he might be on the older side. Ryan, he's not getting any younger, in his 30s, and there is a bit of an older group in that Lightning defense specifically. You have Victor Hedman and now Ryan McDonagh, who are both over 30. And McDonagh is just someone who knows the system. It's important to have veterans when you're going through changes as a franchise. And McDonagh, 35 years old, spent some of the best years of his career with Tampa, 2017 through 2022. So 5 years with the Lightning. And all positives. I mean, this is just a guy who is a very good defender and certainly can, help the offensive side as well. 313 career assists. And if he plays a full season, he could reach 1,000 games in his career as well, could Ryan McDonagh. And one of the better all-around defenders in the league in his prime when he was a top 4 defender for Tampa. And he is going to be crucial to this Lightning season. I think having a guy like him is just something good to set the tone, helps reduce some of the impact from the experience lost with Steven Stamkos, because he is a veteran. He won those Stanley Cups with the Lightning. He had success with the Rangers. He was in the Stanley Cup final with them back in 2014 as well when they lost to the Kings. So this is a guy who has been there and done just about everything that you can do in your hockey career. And the 12th overall pick in 2007, in my opinion, should be the first-line defender alongside Victor Hedman when the Lightning season begins. And quickly, we'll go through goalies before we circle back and see from every group who is going to need to make the biggest impact. I think with goalies, that's an easy question. Andrei Vasilevskiy is a guy that always needs to perform. Last season, the Lightning's goaltenders, aside from Vasilevskiy, were an even 500. Andrei expected to be healthier this year, and a healthy Andrei Vasilevskiy is always a good thing. And for the Tampa Bay Lightning, Matt Tompkins, Jonas Johansson are guys who expect to feature as the backup goalies. There are 6 on their training camp roster: Matt Tompkins, Ryan Fanti, Harrison Menigan, Brandon Halverson, Jonas Johansson, and Andrei Vasilevskiy. Johansson was one of the Lightning's backups last year and had the best record as a backup. 12 wins in 24 games started. He lost 7 times with 5 losses in overtime. 2 shutouts for Jonas Johansson. And for me, he is the key goalie other than Andrei Vasilevskiy. Only goalie besides Vasilevskiy with a true winning record last season for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Matt Tompkins was an even 3-3 in 6 games, and Johansson won 12 of his 24 for a winning percentage over 600. Swedish international, 28 years old, so he's still young, and it'll just be good to have, more help. It's always good to have more help in the cage, and Jonas Johansson is probably the best choice when it comes to backing up Andrei Vasilevskiy. We're going to take a quick break and then go to our final segment about who needs to step up when it comes into training camp. We talked about some of the key players of each roster, some of the new transactions between all those guys and the existing Lightning players that you all know and love. We'll see who needs to step up. First, we'll take a quick break. Welcome back to Locked On Lightning, your team every day. And we're ready for the final segment of our show today. Who needs to step up? We've talked about this episode, Lightning's training camp roster, 58 players that needs to be cut down by more than 50%. And who needs to show up? Defensively, we talked about Ryan McDonagh as someone that needs to step up. Emil Lilleberg is someone that I'm expecting a pretty big performance from the Tampa Bay Lightning. He has been one of their two-way players for the last couple of seasons and signed to his first full-on one-way NHL contract during this offseason. And we do expect Lilleberg to challenge for the first line. A 2-year contract for Emil signed at the beginning of July. And he is someone that the Lightning have really been getting ready for situations like this. I mean, he's a guy who played 37 games in the NHL last season for Tampa, and a guy who has been with the Lightning for a couple of years. He made his NHL debut, acquired as a prospect from Arizona a couple of years ago. He was a fourth-round pick in 2021, played 5 playoff games for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but finished with a plus-minus of -3. He was -15 in his first 37 games with Tampa, did provide 5 assists and average 1 penalty minute per every minute on the ice. So Lilleberg might need to chill out when it comes to the penalties a little bit. But I think what we've already seen from him is a solid physical defender who makes good hits, goes after the puck, and could be a force on defense if used the correct way. So Emil Lilleberg is going to be a key on defense. I believe Ryan McDonough is also someone, Darren Radish, another one of the guys who's been here before, just to provide more of that experience, some of the that's already on the team. Victor Hedman, I think, needs to just prove that he's the captain. But Emil Lilleberg, Ryan McDonough are 2 guys I've got my eye on. And, of course, J.J. Moser is going to be looked at under a magnifying glass coming in as the defender in the Mikhail Sergachev trade we talked about as well. Between those 3 players, Moser, Lilleberg, and McDonough, those are going to be the 3 key defenders to watch when you look at training camp this season. I think Lilleberg is the guy I have my closest eye on. I mean, he's a guy who acquires a prospect, really a member of like Lightning's youth system. And when you ever have a guy that you're trying to bring along to the NHL, I think that is always something worth watching. And it's something that really could add an extra punch to your season in a positive way. So I think Lilleberg is my key defender. You can put yours up on X if you follow us here with Locked On Lightning, or you can go on my Twitter at Josh_Sperber. Forwards. This is going to make it a lot tougher. Some of the younger guys are going to be competing for spots. You got Nico Huhtinen, Lucas Svechkovsky is someone that I'm just curious to watch because that move really flew under the radar. Zemgus Girgensons, apologize if I butchered that pronunciation, is another guy who was in over 60 games with the Buffalo Sabres last year. He is someone else that is going to be pretty important. Signed a 3-year contract for under $1 million a year back at the beginning of July. Nice physical forward. Averaged most hits per 60 minutes amongst all Buffalo skaters last season. And he's a guy who is going to reach his 700th NHL game this season. It's his first year outside of Buffalo, second all-time in hits. Just a nice physical forward in Jurgensons. So that's someone certainly to keep an eye on, see how he adjusts. Connor Geekie, obviously, is a big name to watch, as we talked about, coming in untested in that Sergachev trade. We'll see how much he even plays with the Tampa Bay Lightning over the course of this season. Braden Point is someone who is really starting to break out, and he's got a chance to really have a big year, take some of that pressure off of Jake Gensel when it comes to scoring and, replacing Steven Stamkos, I guess. That is someone big to watch. Obviously, Nikita Kucherov is someone who's going to be in everyone's eyes following up an incredible season where he led the NHL in points. But if we're looking for just one key player from these guys, I think Jake Gensel is the easy answer. I want to see Lucas Collins. I think that move was really kind of under the radar. So he could be something. Cam Atkinson, I think, could have a breakout year and really make an impact on offense for the Tampa Bay Lightning as well. But, I mean, you really any of those forwards, a lot of potential impact players, but I think Jake Gensel, certainly the one under the most pressure. And for this Lightning team to succeed, Jake Gensel kind of has to be at the center of it. So I think The players to watch: Andre Vasilevsky, Jonas Johansson in goal. Johansson really needs to step up the most. I think having a formidable backup option for Tampa in goal. Johansson is the guy who needs to step up in goal for Tampa just to get someone behind Vasilevsky, the number one choice in the net. Then on defense, JJ Moser, Emil Lilleberg, two people that need to step up. I'm really curious to see what Lilleberg does in his first year full on in the NHL. But I think with Giannis Moser coming in that Sergachev trade, a lot of higher expectations. So I think defensively, he needs to step up the most in training camp. And Jake Gensel really needs to prove that he is the answer for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So with those three players, that is who I think needs to step up most from this training camp roster breakdown. Thank you all for tuning in to Locked On Lightning. And we'll have another episode coming tomorrow. Just remember, this is your team every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Lightning your first listen today. And for your second listen, make sure to look at Locked On NHL, where we've got local experts that keep you updated daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of the upcoming NHL season. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you all for tuning in to today's episode of Locked On Lightning. I'm Josh Sperber. I'll be back tomorrow, and have a great day. Go Bolts.